the age of political experiments, of grand monarchy and parliaments and republicanism in Europe. The Latin Church was broken. The Holy Roman Empire was in extreme decay. The history of Europe from the opening of the 16th century onward is a story of peoples feeling their way darkly to some new method of government, better adapted to the new conditions that were arising. In the ancient world, over long periods of time, there have been change dynasty and even changes of ruling race and language, but the form of government through monarch and temple remained fairly stable, and still more stable was the ordinary way of living in this more modern Europe since the 16th century. The dynastic changes are unimportant, and the interest of history lies in the wide and increasing variety of experiments in political and social organization. The political history of the world from the 16th century onward was, we have said, an effort, a largely unconscious effort of mankind to adapt its political and social methods to certain new conditions that had now risen. The effort to adapt was complicated by the fact that the conditions themselves were changing with a steadily increasing rapidity. The adaptation, mainly unconscious and almost always unwilling, for man in general hates voluntary change, has lagged more and more behind the alterations in conditions. From the 16th century onward, the history of mankind is a story of political and social institutions becoming more and more plainly misfits, less comfortable and more vexations, and of the slow reluctant realization of the need for a conscious and deliberate reconstruction of the whole scheme of human societies in the face of needs and possibilities new to all the former experiences in life. What are these changes in the conditions of human life that have organized the balance of empire, priest, peasant and trader with periodic refreshment by barbaric conquest that has held human affairs in the old world in a sort of working rhythm for more than 100 centuries? They are manifold and various, for human affairs are multitudinously complex, but the main changes seem all to turn upon one cause, namely the growth and extension of a knowledge of the nature of things, beginning first of all in small groups of intelligent people and spreading at first slowly, and in the last 500 years very rapidly to larger and larger proportions of the general population. But there has also been a great change in human conditions due to a change in the spirit of human life. This change has gone on side by side with the increase and extension of knowledge and is subtly connected with it. There has been an increasing disposition to treat a life based on the common and more elementary desires and gratifications as unsatisfactory, and to seek relationship with and service and participation in a larger life. This is the common characteristic of all the great religions that have spread throughout the world in the last 20 odd centuries, Buddhism, Christianity and Islam alike. They have had to do with the spirit of man in a way that the older religions did not have to do. They are forces quite different in their nature and effect from their old fetishistic blood sacrifice religions of the priest and temple that they had in part more modified and in part replaced. They have gradually evolved a self-respect in the individual and a sense of participation and responsibility in the common concerns of mankind that did not exist among the populations of the earliest civilizations. The first considerable change in the conditions of political and social life was the simplification and extended use of writing in the ancient civilizations, which made larger empires and wider political understandings practicable and inevitable. The next movement forward came with the introduction of the horse and later on of the camel as a means of transport, the use of wheeled vehicles, the extension of roads, and the increased military efficiency due to the discovery of the terrestrial iron. Then followed the profound economic disturbances due to the device of coin money and the change in the nature of debt, proprietorship and trade due to the convenient but dangerous convention. The empires grew in size and range, and men's ideas grew likewise. To correspond with these things came the disappearance of local gods, the age of theocracy, and the teaching of the great world religions. Came also the beginnings of recent and recorded history and geography, the first realization by man of his profound ignorance, and the first systematic research for knowledge. For a time, the scientific process which began so brilliantly in Greece and Alexandria was interrupted. The raids of the Teutonic barbarians, the westward drive of the Mongolian peoples, convulsive religious reconstruction, and great pestilences put enormous strains upon political and social order. When civilizations emerged again from this phase of conflict and confusion, slavery was no longer the basis of economic life, and the first paper mills were preparing a new medium for collective information and cooperation in printed matter. Gradually, at this point, and that the search for knowledge, the systematic scientific process was resumed, and now from the 16th century onward, as an inevitable byproduct of systematic thought, appeared a steadily increasing series of inventions and devices affecting the intercommunication and interaction of men with one another. They all tended towards wider range of action, greater mutual benefits or injuries, and increased cooperation, and they came faster and faster. Men's minds had not been prepared for anything of the sort, and until the great catastrophes at the beginning of the 20th century quickened men's minds, the historian has very little to tell of any intelligently planned attempts to meet the new conditions this increasing flow of inventions was creating. The history of mankind for the last 4 centuries is rather like that of a imprisoned sleeper, stirring clumsily and uneasily while the prison that restrains and shelters him catches fire, not walking but incorporating the crackling and warmth of the fire with ancient and incongruous dreams. Then, like that of a man consciously awake to danger and opportunity. Since history is the story not of individual lives but of communities, it is inevitable that the inventions that figure most in the historical record are inventions affecting communications. In the 16th century, the chief new things that we have note are the appearance of printed paper and the seaworthy, ocean-going sailing ship using the new device of the Mariner's compass. The former cheapened, spread, and revolutionized teaching, public information and discussion, and the fundamental operations of political activity. The latter made the round world one. But almost equally important was the increased utilization and improvement of guns and gunpowder, which the Mongols had first brought westward in the 13th century. They destroyed the practical immunity of barons in their castles and of walled cities. Guns swept away feudalism. Constantinople fell to guns. Mexico and Peru fell before the tenure of the Spanish guns. The 17th century saw the development of systematic scientific publication, a less conspicuous but ultimately far more pregnant innovation. Conspicuous among the leaders in this great step forward step was Sir Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626. Afterwards, Lord Verulam, Lord Chancellor of England. He was the pupil and perhaps the mouthpiece of another Englishman, Dr. Gilbert, the experimental philosopher of Colchester, 1540 to 1603. This says second Bacon, like the first, preached observation and experiment.